Hey guys, this is Jennifer Brave, the owner of Facets Relational Care, and I'm going to start my series today on advice to numbers by their own number. So, I didn't get enough feedback from types 1, 2, and 3 in order to make a video that I thought would be substantial enough to be worth your time and mine. So, we're going to jump straight to type 4. Not surprisingly, at least to me, I got more information from type 4 than I did from any other type, but 4s are usually into this stuff because they're very much about self-awareness and growth and relational health and things of that nature. So we're going to start with type 4. I want to say before I go into this that there are going to be instances in here where I use very specific quotes. The majority of the time, I'm probably going to summarize just to capture the overall idea. I got a lot of stuff, so I've made a page front and back of notes here, so we're just going to jump into that, and I'm going to tell you what was said, and then I'll also try to give you some theory to kind of come in and explain or support some of that too in instances where I can, because I think if you're a 4, that may help you to make more sense out of these things if these are some things that you struggle with too. And if you're not a 4, I think it can help you understand the 4s that you know a little bit better. I'm also going to say that while I asked for specific advice from one type for others of their type, I didn't necessarily for type 4 get advice so much as I got life stories and just telling me about the things that they struggle with. But that in and of itself has a lot of value. In reading the stories that people sent me, I actually learned a few things about type 4 that I found surprising. So I am going to include those things here as well as any advice that they gave for overcoming those things or dealing with them, if that makes sense. So here we go. So there were 4 basic things that all of the 4s that contacted me said that they really struggled with. Those 4 things are guilt, feeling like they aren't enough, not being confident in themselves, and a frustration with being so emotional or so aware of their emotions or having such an intense emotional energy and not knowing how to turn that down. Okay. So starting with guilt, I had a 4 that said, it was really helpful to know that guilt is a regular thing for type 4. It helps me feel normal. Yes, guilt is a very regular thing for type 4. I wanted to add some reasons why type 4 feels guilty. These reasons come again from some of the things mentioned in the emails that were sent to me, but it also comes from a couple of 4s that I've known in my personal life and feedback that they've given me, and just kind of some things that I've picked up intuitively as an INFJ that I think is there. 4s feel guilty for dragging everyone else down. And by that, I mean they move a little bit slower. They're slower to get to things than the rest of us. There's a lot of emotional hesitancy to show up and be fully present with life. I'll also say this, 1-4 very specifically mentioned that she feels guilty for being so emotional. She specifically used the word melancholy. She attached that onto there. And I've gotten that feedback from 4s that I know personally in my life too. They feel guilty for being so melancholy. I had a 4 say that she didn't use the word melancholy, she used the word sad, and she didn't want to burden other people with her feeling sad or feeling melancholy, again is another word, because she felt like other people are more carefree than her. They move on with life faster than she does, and she kind of feels like a buzzkill is a better way to say it. You know what I mean? So she feels guilty for being the person that's melancholy. I've had 4s say that they feel guilty because they are not as engaged fully with life and with others as they feel like they should be. They feel guilty for being what they perceive to be as broken, whether or not the rest of us on the outside see that is another matter, but fours believe that that's what other people see in us too. So they feel guilty for being the broken person. I had one four specifically say, why can't I just let stuff go and be happy like everyone else? So, in other words, again, going back to the idea that they feel guilty for having that melancholy, for being the buzzkill, right? I had a four make a recommendation for how she deals with that specifically, and I love this answer. I'm going to summarize what she said. She said, put your self-care first. Withdrawing and spending time alone can be very beneficial to a type 4. It's nothing to feel guilty about, and she's right. I agree with this wholeheartedly because the alone time that 4s take, when they withdraw, we talk about this a lot in Enneagram language. The word is aloof, because they'll show up and they'll be present in relationships and in life, and then they withdraw and they're not present. And I don't necessarily mean that they're physically gone, even though of course that happens, but they can be in a room, in a situation, in a place, and it's kind of like they've just checked out. They're not there. You know what I mean? All of their attention has turned inward to how they're being emotionally affected by where they're at. And so this is where we get the idea of being aloof for a type 4. That's a very simple way to say it. Again, it expresses itself in relationships, being fully engaged in the relationship and being fully open and authentic, and then closing off in the relationships for fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, and rejected. And by the way, out of those three things, the number one thing that the 4s told me that they fear isn't necessarily so much the abandonment and the rejection as it is being misunderstood. Although being misunderstood could lead to abandonment and rejection. And so I think that that's still under there. It's just a much deeper level of insecurity. Whether or not 4s register that or not, I don't know. I would imagine that they do, but misunderstood was the word that was used most often in the emails sent to me. Piggybacking onto that, the 4 that suggested that the withdrawing and the spending time alone was very good because it allowed her to process what she was feeling. I am going to say it a little differently. I think that when you're a 4 and you withdraw for a little while, and especially if you can physically get to a place where you're alone, that's going to be beneficial because it allows you to process and unload the emotional energy. Not necessarily a specific emotion, even though that does happen too. 4s are like emotional sponges. And again, I want to go back to emotional energy. It's not necessarily that they soak up specific feelings in the environment around them, although that can be the case, especially if they are extroverted feeling type 4s. But really, 4s just pick up on emotional energy in a room. They're just sponges. They walk in and immediately they just take all of it on. And that can be very overwhelming and very draining for anybody. So the alone time allows them the opportunity to just let some of that energy go, let it out. And the way that 4s do that is they brood. That's the other word that you'll hear used a lot in Enneagram circles. We'll talk about 4s brooding. So in other words, they go and they get to these places where they can be alone, and they go through that process time and they brood and they take in that energy and they kind of let it bubble up, if you will. And in that process, that's when they find the ability to let it go if that's what they choose to do. So they've got to take it in and really emphasize it in order for it to be something that they can put down and move on from. And that's what I had one 4 say, again in different words, but she talked about how doing that helped her appreciate the time then that she could be fully present in life and with other people and in her relationships. So she can be alone and process all of this and let it go, and then go back out with a clean slate, if you will, for lack of a better word, and re-engage and be fully present there. And she's got an appreciation for that now that she didn't have before because she felt so guilty about having to go and retreat so often to do that processing time. I want to say, before I go any further with some other things, this particular piece of advice that was offered ties in really well with a video for type 4 that I just did in a series about why each Enneagram type is awesome. In essence, really what that series was about is it was taking the things that traditionally, when teaching the Enneagram, we consider to be personality flaws that cause problems and prevent growth and development. And the point that I was trying to drive home in a very indirect way in that series was that sometimes the behavioral patterns that we engage in underneath our Enneagram type can be very beneficial and very helpful. And if you use them appropriately, they can be a tool for your integration and your betterment of self. And really, that's what this 4 was saying here. And she's absolutely right. I love that. She brought up an aspect of type 4, the aloofness and the brooding, as again it's traditionally called, and talks about how she's found that it's actually something that's helpful for her when it's used appropriately and not at all something to feel guilty about. So I really like that. The same 4 also said that for her specifically, she finds that she has to take breaks from people or just places that are overwhelming for her throughout the day. She talked about feeling some guilt about that because everybody else is ready to go on with life and just move on to the next thing and kind of carry the responsibility load that they have all day long. And she feels like she has to disengage every now and again throughout the day just to kind of, again, recharge those batteries and let that emotional energy go. And she feels guilty about that. But again, I love the idea of putting your self-care first and using that tendency to withdraw, to brood, the aloofness, again, to your advantage like she does. It's a great idea. They feel like they have to have something external of who they are to feel like they have any value as a person. The examples that were given to me were knowing things that other people don't know, having really unique talents that other people don't have, and being able to achieve things that other people can't achieve. I do want to say that this is what makes type 4 look a lot like type 3 sometimes. Believe it or not, I think when you read the profiles between the two, they seem pretty distinct, or at least that's me. But in practice, the 4s and the 3s that I have known have been very easily confused sometimes. My dad was the same way. He was a 4 with a 3 wing, but when I first started learning the Enneagram, for a while I thought he was a 3 with a 4 wing. It took me a while to get that distinction. I also used to work with a lady, same thing. She was an ENFP though, and ENFPs have a lot of 3-ish qualities to them. They also have 4-ish qualities too, but I think if the ENFP profile was going to be confused for anything, it would probably be type 3 before type 4. Anyways, the point is, I used to work with a lady that was a 4 with a 3 wing, and she was also an ENFP. And for a little while, I thought she was a 3 with a 4 wing. So it took some time for me to get that differentiated as well. So I got that feedback. I had a lot of 4s talk about how they don't feel like they have any confidence in themselves. I wanted to read a quote that I got in one email. I have always felt separate from those around me, even in close circles. I am scared to share myself because I know that I'll be misunderstood. I don't like having to explain myself to others. I prefer that they just get it. So I can see how, if you're a 4, this particular 4 touched on the idea of having to be open and vulnerable. In other words, being willing to show herself to other people, and whoever it is that she is, whatever she's trying to express, feelings, thoughts, opinions, it doesn't matter, and that being misunderstood. That can be a really intimidating thing, especially when you're a 4, if you have had a history of that happening, or even if you just have the belief that that's what's going to happen. I entirely understand why you wouldn't have any confidence in yourself, because that can lead over time to this internal belief, often unconsciously, that there is something wrong with me. Every time I try to express myself, people get something completely different that I wasn't intending, or they get offended, or they label me or come to a conclusion about me that's not at all who I am, and that's very upsetting. And it can make you feel like perhaps the way that you're coming off is offensive or just unclear. So I absolutely understand why that would be something that leaves fours feeling self-conscious about opening themselves up and being authentic with other people, which I would also imagine as a four can be very debilitating, because being open and authentic with other people at the core of who you are is really what you want. I didn't get anybody that gave me any particular advice on how they're coping with that, but I did want to mention it because it was a common theme that I read in a lot of the emails that I got. Another thing too that I got a lot from several different fours was talking about things that they don't like about themselves, which was interesting. That a lot of the fours that emailed me went into depth about just things they didn't like about who they were, which I found fascinating, that so much attention and focus in the emails that I got would have been put on that. And again, not all, but a lot. I think that in and of itself kind of speaks to the four mindset, that feeling of being inadequate and that feeling of being guilty just for being who they are. So kind of the fact that that was a very common theme in the emails stood out to me as being a very fourish thing too. One of the things I got a lot was that a lot of fours are saying that they feel like they get too caught up again in that emotional energy, and that it's very draining for them. A lot of fours have said they don't like that. They wish they could change it. I had a couple of fours, more than one, say that they wish they could be more like type 5 in the respect that they can emotionally detach and approach things from a more logical perspective. Just find some way to step outside of that emotional energy because it's so very draining for them. That's pretty much the content that I got from the emails that were sent to me by Enneagram Type 4. I'm going to leave the comments open on this video. If you're a 4 and you want to throw in some additional information, or you guys get in here and start having a discussion about it, that'd be really cool. This is the perfect place to do it, since this video is about 4s helping other 4s. So I don't know, you could have a little 4 support group in the comment section down here if you wanted to. If you have not seen my series on why each Enneagram type is awesome, I have a video for type 4. It's available on my Patreon website. I'm going to put the link below in the comment section. It's available to everybody who subscribes to tier 1 or higher. So tier 1 is the lowest subscription that you can have. It's $1 a month. You can pledge more if that's what you want to do. You don't have to. $1 is fine. That'll get you access to all of those videos. If you want to pledge a minimum of $2 or more a month, it also gives you access to the podcast episodes that were made from those videos. Although I will say for that series, I wasn't able to do a podcast episode for every number. So you've got a whole video series, just not a whole podcast series. But anyways, it's pretty cool. Check it out. This is going to be free on YouTube for everybody, since you guys were so kind to help me out and give me the information to make the videos. So yeah, I'll be back with type 5.